welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
How's it going, everybody? It is December 21st, 2025. It's Sunday. Yes, we got a special broadcast today. Why? Because it's important. And when things are important, we got to get her done. Special guests that we're going to be having tonight here is 107, aka Juanito. And the topic is going to be 99% surrounding the conversation of Tina Peters. So we're going to get right into that. I will ask you guys to do me a solid. Make sure you stay tuned towards the end of the show when I offer you guys my final thoughts and share this out, because there is a call to action at the end of the show that I need you guys to help get the message on. So with that, let's get to a few sponsors and then let's get into this show, because we have another show coming out late tonight over there on Badlands with Q After Hours. So first on deck, and I'll see you guys in just a moment.
I'm excited to announce that we're having our biggest 3-in-1 sale ever with a limited edition product, a back-in-stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get our MyPillow bed sheets, only $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings, regular $119.98, only $29.88. Once they're gone for good. How about our My Towels? They're finally back in stock, but not for long. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And for the first time and the only time ever, get our limited edition premium My Pillows. They're made with Giza cotton and designer gusset. Queen $17.98, Kings only $19.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get the best offers ever. Quantities are extremely limited, so order now.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing our loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
Ladies and gentlemen, remember, support the people that support this show. We have a returning guest, someone that we admire, respect, and always delivers great information for us. And in this particular situation, we're going to talk about a very important person, make sure everybody understands where we're at and what needs to be done. So let me welcome to the stage Juan. Thank you for joining us again. How you doing, brother?
Hey, great to be here. And sorry, we had a show scheduled, I think, Friday, and I got a little backed up on a couple of the other shows, and you were gracious enough to let us move it to today. And so I appreciate that. It just goes with the territory. We're trying to do some important stuff here. And so, yeah.
No, absolutely. And like I said, God's timing. It's always God's timing. So give us an update, Juan. What is Tina Peters' current situation, and where can we go from there?
A couple things. First off, she was in solitary for 2 weeks. They can only keep them in solitary for so long, and then she was released back in the general population, put in another cell block. When she was released from solitary, something different than what's been happening occurred. A lot of the other inmates have been, pretty abrasive with Tina at different times. But as she was brought out of the solitary into the general area population, the prisoners cheered. why was that? And Clapton plotted her and like that. Well, because she has brought attention to the prison conditions at the prison, which are pretty tough, and cleanliness and everything else. The other side of the coin is now they've gotten soap and water and cleaner, and they've got the prisoners cleaning up all the mold all over the showers and other areas of the prison. Why is that? Because the feds are coming to examine prison conditions, and they want to clean it up. It's like, the president's coming to town, Biden, get all the homeless off the streets so that it looks better. we don't touch it for 10 years, and then when he shows up, Yeah, so I mean, it's the same thing here. Now we're going to clean up the prison before the feds show up to find out what the prison conditions like. Why didn't you do it before? Well, we don't care. Well, all of a sudden we care. Why? Because here's one of the things that can happen in Tina's situation. Let me just give you a couple of scenarios. So this is one of them. It's not uncommon for the feds to come in and take over a state-run prison. It's happened many times in history where prison conditions were so far out of compliance with federal standards that must be met by all the states for prisoners. Prisoners have civil rights too. Just because they've been incarcerated doesn't mean they don't have civil rights. And when their civil rights are being broken, violated, then you can, the feds can come in and take over, literally come in and take over a prison. And in this case, what are those civil rights look like? Conditions, for example, in Tina's case last night, she's back in the cell. The air conditioning system, the ducts, are so filthy, so full of something, and it blows right into the cell right on them. That is so bad right now that it causes her all sorts of grief, coughing, and everything else. The problem is that, she's a lung cancer survivor. There's something wrong in the prison's duct system, the way it blows in the cell. But on top of that, either it's ice cold in the cells, which her cell was down in the 40s forever. It's just brutal. And she's coughing and wheezing, miserable, cold. So you can't have normal for some reason. So then they up the temperature. Now, last night, the cell's like in the mid 90s. Okay, you're in a hot box. and it's cold. And then they're blowing the air in there.
All right, we're out again. All right, so Juan, the last thing that we got from you was that they had put the temperatures in the upper 90s, kind of turned it into a hot box, and something was being blown out of these vents that was just creating some type of breathing issues, wheezing and stuff like that. And then we lost you. So if you want to pick it up from there.
Okay. Well, all the way along while she's been at this facility, she's complained that something is irritating her lungs, and other prisoners have complained the same thing. The vents, there's people that actually go in and clean vents in places, houses and things like that. Well, these probably haven't been cleaned in 30 years or something. Who knows? And but whatever it is, it's one thing for guards that maybe get to leave at the end of the day or walk around the facility. Some places aren't as bad as others, but when you're in a cell and it's blowing right on you, there's no escape. And so something there is very irritating to Tina, and she's coughing and wheezing and like that. They're trying to address the issues in the prison before the feds get there and do their walkthrough and try and figure out what else is going on and listen to the prisoners. And oh no, it's all better now. Whatever was there, it's not there now. You can't see what it was. Somebody been in there documenting. Yeah, prisoners have. So, but a federal, takeover, if you will, of a prison is not unknown. Where they just can't seem to get it right or consistently won't address the issues. Prisoners have civil rights. Now, think about it in this context. If the prison is refusing to protect the civil rights of prisoners on conditions, temperature, dust. Is the food quality safe? Is the water safe? There's question about drinking fountains. I mean, these drinking fountains. Some of the prisoners complain, of parasites. Even seeing water parasites in there. I'll give you an example. Jen and I were at a very, very high-end hotel. Went to use the pool sauna area. And I'm in at the sauna, I see down at the drain, and I could see these transparent parasites by the drain. We're like, oh my gosh. I took pictures and like that and said, okay, let's bow out. I don't need this. Showed them to the management where we were actually considering getting a property in there, and decided we weren't going to do that. And they called in somebody to clean it up, apologized, all the other stuff. We come back 3 months later, and it was still there. The parasites are still as visible as they ever were, maybe even worse. And what they had to do is they went in and had to sleeve and replace pipes all through the building. This is, I don't know, probably a 20-story building. And it was a very extensive job. I don't think they're done yet. That started like probably a year ago. And it's hard to get rid of some of this stuff. Well, now imagine a prison where they've got stuff like this that gets going and they get in your system. You're walking around in, slippers or thongs or whatever, and you're getting that water all over you if it's got parasites in it. These people can't get away. And they're not monitoring those conditions, not paying that close of attention. Even after I showed them the problem at this very high-end, highest-end hotel in that particular city, really, they couldn't get it right. The employees were making excuses. The management was making excuses. Oh, yeah, we're going to address it. We brought in professionals. No, they did not get it under control. If you're incarcerated somewhere and they've got, old crap, old pipes, who knows what's going on. Those people are getting sick. It's not, there's no excuse. So let's just say, for example, that the civil rights of prisoners are being violated. And there's federal law in place that guarantees their civil rights are protected. Tina just got a presidential pardon. Her civil rights as a citizen of the United States are right now being violated. The governor says it's a state issue and that they have the right to keep Tina. Do you know that there's no case of this type that's ever been heard in any court, ever been adjudicated? In fact, nobody has ever tried, nobody's ever overturned a federal pardon from the president. So it would be a first if Colorado succeeded in doing that. With no case law, and the government tell you there is case, or that is the law, he's making a judicial decision where there is no case law to back him up. Now, what's he basing it on? He's basing it on, he didn't make it out of the blue. He's got attorneys that have looked at this, the attorney general who's now running for governor who've looked at this. And there's a lot at stake, a lot at risk for Colorado at this point in time. So with that in mind, they've said we're not letting her go. You let Tina go, man, unleash the hounds of hell, because they're in trouble on the whole Dominion and then the way they run their elections in Colorado. They don't want to let her go. She's a scarecrow to anybody else challenging those systems in the state or out of the state. So, but they're violating Tina's civil rights, keeping her right now. She has a presidential pardon. Literally this second, she can personally sue everybody civilly involved in keeping her in prison, including the governor, including every single guard, including anybody that's involved in physically blocking her from walking out the doors of the prison. She can sue them all. And my advice to her is going to be, you're going to do just exactly that, not just for yourself. It's not about just making a bunch of money or something like that, but for the next person, that they never get it in their mind to do this again. And so you have to go and make a point here. All those guards that are personally enforcing what the governor said, well, the governor told me to do it. Well, okay, it sounds extreme, but it's not as extreme as the first time I'm going to say it. It's a very Nazi-esque kind of a defense. Command told me to do it. Hitler told me to do it. The Fuhrer. We had laws in place. You know, they had laws in place in Germany about sterilizing people who may not be smart enough, who may not have, you know, certain skill sets. And so, in fact, in the Nuremberg trials, the first movie, you know, the new Nuremberg movie's out, and it's talking about Goebbels and Goebbels and a bunch of the other really high up generals. But the original Nuremberg movie from the 60s, Stanley Kramer, the director of it, a great director, did this movie. It's got all the best stars. The first Nuremberg movie was about the period a couple years after the war, after all the generals had been prosecuted, the high uppity ups that everybody knew about. And now it was down to the doctors, the police officers, the judges who were enforcing these laws which were against humanity, sending people to camps, sending people to death. Sterilizing young men, young women in the most grotesque theater, you know, going into a hospital by order. If you don't, you know, we'll come find you, we'll drag you in there. We won't use it. And we'll come get your whole family and send people to the camps. When they were doing, in the first Nuremberg movie, where they're talking about more of the street level class, as a guard in the prison in Colorado, put yourself in that place. Are you a non-existent authority's proclamation of the governor? You know, he says he has the authority to keep Tina incarcerated under state stuff, but there's no case law to back that up. Same with the attorney general, the director of the guards. You're enforcing something as though it's in law and you're doing the right thing, and the reality is there's no history within the court system, within the enforcement, to support what Governor Polis is pulling off here. So if you're obeying a law that isn't the law, it's like, you know, I'm helping with the bank robbery, but I only drove the car. I wasn't in the bank with the gun. Well, you get charged the same as everybody else.
Yep.
What my advice is, you know, to all of those prison guards, what my advice is that you need to include the union. All of these people are members of the Government Employees Federation of Unions thing. I think, you know, there's quite a few union halls there. And by the way, a lot of these guards, the union that they belong to is for guards both in the state prisons and the federal prisons. Okay, so they're all members of the union. A lot of these people working at the state prison are hoping to get sent over to the Alcatraz of the Rocky federal prison and make a little more money and benefits and things like that. So, but if they're violating pardon from Trump, Trump could very easily say, anybody that participated, you're out. Okay, just like he's going after all the military staff that was enforcing the COVID vaccination for military, the military code, and they're out. And so you could have guards that would not be employable within the federal system, or would also lose their certification within the state based on their actions. So what the guards actually need to do at this moment in time, and I include the warden in this, okay? I would recommend it to the director of the Bureau of Prisons in this. They need to get a letter that's signed and dated, not just a verbal promise over the phone or something said over the internet. They need to get a letter from the governor and from the attorney general that they are going to be indemnified against any personal losses or expenses that they might have put against them uh, uh, because of what they're doing, keeping Tina Peters incarcerated. Now, that may sound kind of silly. Why would they get them? Because think of Floyd Brown, the officer Chavez. It turns out that everybody involved from the medical died of a drug overdose. Uh, he had meth in his system, and it killed him. And that the pressure put on Floyd Brown by the officer holding him in place in no way, shape, or form can be construed as having killed him. Yet, Officer Chavez has, been broken completely financially. He sits in a prison right now, trying to get free on the new information, and yet, he's right there. Tina Peters, the person that these guards are holding in place, she was the clerk of the Mesa County, elected by the citizens, prosecuted, by the way, illegally, because this prosecution, there's no basis for her to have been charged or prosecuted in state court. It's enforcing federal mandates requiring protection of that data for 22 months within the federal election system, protecting federal election data. And at a technical level, she wasn't even working solely for Mesa County or Colorado. She was working precisely in the 2020 election as an officer of the U.S. House of Representatives. Why? Because the recording data, the vote information, the integrity of the vote, the record keeping of the vote for the 22 months was all for the House. The electors that left Colorado to go the election results from Colorado for Biden, those electors were taking information that Tina Peters was recording, collating, tabulating, preserving for the U.S. House and for the electors that went from Colorado to the U.S. House. She was an officer of his technically serving a purpose there within the federal. So to say that it's only a matter, by the way, in her case, in the court case, 41 times there was motions made to, many of those motions related to the fact that she was being prosecuted within the state for something that, if it was true, would have to be prosecuted federally. They were out of their lane. And the judge refused to rule on those motions or denied those motions and proceeded with the prosecution. He refused to recognize their authority, wouldn't let them be in there. And then he changes or modifies or adjusts the jury instructions in such a way that practically the only thing they can do is find her guilty. So Tina will win on appeal, ultimately. The problem is, in the normal course of things, look at how long we've known that Officer Chavez didn't kill Floyd Brown. But he's somebody's political prisoner that suits a narrative of police against minorities and things like that. So there's a political side to it. Plus, once it's in place and the decision's made and blah, blah, blah with the jury and all that, now you got to fight for years to get out. Does Tina have years for this to play out? The president acted when all of the negotiations with the Colorado prison system, including asking nicely for Tina to be released into federal custody, and the federal would cover all of the expenses, the transfer, anything. They could even come back and revisit the state charges at a later time, but for the time being, she has utility value within other federal prosecutions that are underway right now, where grand juries are hearing testimony. And they said no, because they need to make a point. The judge even violated Tina's personal civil rights in his sentencing because he said, you're so verbal and you're unrepentant and you would say things that might damage the public with the denial of the validity of the 2020 vote, that I'm going to give you the harshest possible sentence just to keep you behind bars. Well, that's part of the Eighth Amendment against excessive punishment. Okay, it's insane, and she's a threat to the community. The judge says that, so that's the way it is. She'll win on appeal, but here's the other thing I want to add for everybody in there. And I've said this a couple times over the last week or so, but I'm talking to any of the prison guards or staff or the warden or the director of prisons. Remember what happened with trying to take Trump off the ballot, Colorado. Colorado needed to lead the way, and they were going to claim because he was, convicted as a felon in New York that he had to be taken off the ballot in Colorado. And attorneys advised everybody involved, it wasn't done in a complete vacuum, that they had every right to take him off the ballot. In fact, it was their duty in Colorado to remove Trump from the ballot because he didn't qualify to be on the ballot in Colorado because of this conviction. Well, the conviction was being appealed. It was, in fact, overturned, and there's all sorts of things going on related to that. All the courts in Colorado, all the attorneys involved agreed Trump's off the ballot. It was appealed into the Federal Circuit Court, 10th District, and then to the Supreme Court on an emergency basis. When I did the Supreme Court didn't see it the way Colorado people had said, the lower court said, because they were very highly politicized and they had an agenda, and it worked in Colorado. They were in their own bubble over there. When the Supreme Court listened to the facts of the case, they handed down a 9-0 decision. Now, a 9-0, you don't see that in the Supreme Court. I mean, it's always, 6-3, 7-2 at the most. Most of them are 5-4. A 9-0, you couldn't get the most liberal justice on the Supreme Court, not one of them to side with you, seriously. That's the technical equivalent of calling everybody else involved till you got there an idiot. All those judges, all those attorneys, it's a Frankenbox of idiots, because the Supreme Court easily found even the most liberal justices on the Supreme Court could not find in favor of Colorado, and believe me, they wanted to. They did not want Trump on the ballot, but they'd have to turn the Constitution on its ear, and so they had to find 9-0 against Colorado for taking Trump off the ballot. Now, these are the same legal minds in the same places that are advising the governor of Colorado, the attorney general, all the prison people. Yeah. No problem. You can keep Tina as long as you want. If she dies in prison, too bad, okay? Because she needs to be there. So, yeah, don't let her go. Okay, you're going to lose. You're going to lose. And there is no case law saying you can keep Tina. So I come back to, you have federal oversight going into the Colorado prison system on conditions because their civil rights are being violated. Right this second, today, you could have federal officers coming into the prison to take over the operations at that prison, La Vista prison. They could take it over on numerous grounds, including civil rights violations, because they've taken over state-run prisons before, because the states were not providing security. Go ahead.
Yeah, is there any documentation of this particular prison in the past working with the federal government with prisoner exchanges or anything like that that could be used against them?
I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. It probably has happened. They take people into federal custody that maybe needed another trials or witnesses, all sorts of things. And by the way, for anybody that's saying, well, she should have been in the witness protection program, one of her attorneys that, she has several attorneys. Peter Tickton, President Trump's friend, is the lead attorney on her case, but she has several attorneys. One of the attorneys that's been on the case for quite a while was the first director of the witness protection program all the way back at Nixon. So to think we don't have great advisors on what's possible and the circumstance and everything else, part of the risk in just grabbing her and taking her out under some of those pretenses is that Colorado was going to come back and challenge it in court, and the judges would, probably side with Colorado in that system, and then Tina be back and forth like a ping pong ball and still not be free. And so to just go rip her out was perilous for other reasons. And so the decision was made, even though there was a lot of angst back and forth, that we needed Colorado to agree to release her into federal custody and not have a lot of drama. What they were doing was you get right up to the day, and then somebody would add something, change something, and disagree. We had an understanding that she was going to be released on or before her birthday. And then it got delayed, and then it got delayed a little more, and then it was, well, I guess we'll wait for the habeas corpus hearing, and the judge didn't want to hear certain things, and there was stuff that was put in there. Oh gosh, that really messed up the judge. Now he wasn't going to release her no matter what anyway. You need to get this stuff on the tomorrow put in. A beautiful job on, by the way. Like I said, Tina's going to win all of this, but she doesn't have time to wait for the win in this world the way the system is set up. They're going to drag this out. They want her to die in prison. They want to send a message. You can't beat City Hall. Even if you do beat him, it'll be from your grave. And that's not acceptable. So President Trump steps up, pardons her, and then they refuse to honor it. Now, here's the point. Apart from some of the possibilities going in there and just taking Tina, forget just going after Tina, you go after the whole prison. Take over the whole prison for civil rights violations. Everything, the way it's run, the conditions, things that the guards are not being kept in line on. The temperature's up, 95, it's down in the mid 40s. Why they do it so cold or so hot is because the prisoners are just lethargic, and it's easier to manage them because they're just so cold. They're not doing any mischief. They're just so hot. They're just barely able to control then. You're stuck where they're at. So will that happen? Is there some aspect where not just going in after Tina, but going after the whole prison and taking it under federal authority for some period of time? And then within that federal authority, acknowledging that the pardon is Tina's civil right. With that pardon, she's incarcerated, and it's a violation of her federal civil rights to keep her in prison. And then she can sue everybody. If I was a prison guard, here's what I'd do. You're not an attorney. The warden is not an attorney. The director of the Bureau of Prisons is not an attorney. You're getting legal advice, but it's from in the system. And they're just telling you that they have these authorities. Okay, can they back it up with anything? No. They just tell you, and you got to just assume that they're right. I would immediately today, Sunday, Monday morning at the crack ass of dawn, at the latest, I would be on the phone with your own attorney. Find an attorney, get them on the horn of, your friend from school, your brother-in-law, the guy from church, whatever, and ask them to help you by sending a letter immediately, not by snail mail, to the governor, the attorney general, the director of the Bureau of Prisons, and the warden, essentially saying, is what I'm doing legal? On what basis am I protected? And are you going to protect me, since it's not been determined in a court on this, in the meantime, to cover any legal expenses and civil damages she may win against me, let alone the prison and the state being on the hook for damages. See, from the moment that pardon was issued, there is liability where Tina's civil rights have been violated, and she can sue their ass off, and should and will, I'm sure. With that in mind, if you do something that's in violation of the law, violating somebody's civil rights, why is Chavez in prison? Why couldn't the union keep him from going to jail? Why were his personal assets needed in order to hire attorneys and protect him? He had to
And you're
come up
talking
with
about
his own money to protect him.
You're talking about
Go
Derek
ahead.
Chauvin, right? With the George Floyd case.
Chauvin, yeah, I keep saying Chavez. I mean Chauvin, yeah.
I had a feeling
And
that I knew what you were talking about. I just
so-
wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I apologize. Think about that, though. He's personally on the hook for his actions while he's wearing a badge because he
And the reason,
violated his employment agreement, allegedly.
no, and the reason for that, and this comes from my years of law enforcement, decade and a half, is, and every cop knows this, and every federal agent knows this, everybody that works in prisons knows this. If you're covered by your agencies, you're covered by the attorneys, you're even covered by the POA attorneys, so long as you're not operating outside of policy. The second
Yep.
you go outside of policy, you're on the hook. That's your own. That's your own legal fight, and that's why you telling these guys to send that letter in and saying, hey, are we operating outside of policy here? I need clarification. One, that's CYA for them, and two, it gets the ball rolling for people to realize, are we digging a hole we can't get out of?
Well, and part of the thing too is this: the governor essentially has created a policy. The problem is that policy actually violates Tina's civil rights, and he says that his state authority in this matter is greater than the president's federal authority. And therefore, what President Trump has done is of no consequence, has no bearing on Tina's incarceration. But there's no case law to support him in this type of a situation, regardless of what he has said. So with that in mind, now you have officers, and by the way, I spent a couple hours on Friday with one of my friends who's probably the most prolific writer on policing in the country, who isn't somebody that interprets department policies, but actually writes policy for departments, a completely different level of expertise, okay? He's been chief of police in several of the major markets in the country, biggest cities. And so he's an expert's expert. We talked about this matter. He's actually writing something up for me right now, but the short version is his take on this, looking at what the governor and the attorney general and Bureau of Prisons and the warden are doing with Tina. He wants to be in there in the lawsuit as the expert. They're all going to get their asses handed to them on a plate. But the problem is for the guards. They're in a catch-22, because imagine if a guard says, hey, I don't want to do this with Tina. Assign me to a different area. Don't let me work in that cell block. I don't want to be part of this because I think the president might be right. They have to choose. Am I going to go with what the president said, or am I going to go with what the governor said? So they're in a catch-22 situation, because if they don't go with what the governor said, where's their paycheck coming from? Who's in charge of it? What's the warden's role in this? They could be damaged because they won't get the next promotion. They won't get, choice, and they might even get fired for not following a direct order from the warden concerning abuse. That's where you need the union to step in and protect you, right? So what's going to happen with the union? Is the union going to protect the guards against retribution? And let's go the other direction. You want to get a job over at the federal prison, over at the Supermax, or something comes available somewhere else that you want to move to, do something. A lot of guards go into other, start there, and then they get jobs in other agencies and graduate, okay? Are they going to be persona non grata federally because Trump says no, because you enforce this against that? You don't understand civil rights, you don't understand your authorities, you're not getting the job, but we won't hire anybody like that. Is the union going to protect you from retaliation either by the state or the feds? You don't have a letter that says anything, you're just going along with it. You may be in legal peril. So you need, if you're in the prison, you probably need your direct employer, the warden. your direct supervisor, I should say, some kind of a letter of indemnification. Here's the laws, here's the reasons why you're good to go. So you at least can reasonably argue, I had a position given to me that made sense, and so I continued to do it. You know, you should have something similar from the Director of Bureau of Prisons. You should have something similar from the Attorney General. You should have something similar from the governor, so that if anything goes wrong, and it turns out the governor was wrong, the Attorney General's wrong, the Director of Prisons or the warden are wrong, your personal well-being, including your business reputation, your employability to state or federal government isn't damaged by this. Okay, you could those people have participated just like people in the military that enforced getting the shot illegally. They thought they were on the right. They're all being ripped out of the military. Careers ended. Nope. You enforced something that wasn't legal. You should have known the difference. You could certainly have an opinion, but you couldn't enforce people getting the shot or else they get fired. All those generals, all those command officers, get your ass out the door and don't let the screen door hit you on the way out. Okay. So these guards are in a catch-22 situation. I feel for them. And let me just say this too. You know, being a prison guard in many locations is actually more dangerous than being an officer on the street. You're in direct contact with some of the, most dangerous, conniving people that are there on the planet. I have a lot of respect as a society for people that do this job. They're critical to the safety of the general public. We have to have a prison system. We have to have guards that are in that system. So I'm not anti-guard, and I'm also having a union where their rights and their certain needs and the legal and all that. You know what? If you're not banded together in that way, you get run over. So I'm not an anti-union person in this stuff. I think it's a critical function at this point in our society to be able to work together and to protect that. But then power is only good if you use it. You've got a union that has power. They need to step up. And what's been created here with what Governor Polis is doing, he is enforcing an unfair labor situation. Their rights to work and to work without threat or duress, based on how they're just doing it. Their job has been politicized. They have to choose between the president and the governor. And you might be the biggest Trump hater in the world, but you still want to be able to have your career, or Trump's going to come against you because you didn't obey federal things. So we're not trusting you in any federal jobs moving forward because you didn't protect the civil rights of prisoner. Prisoner has civil rights, pardoned by the president. Do you have anything in writing that says that the president's wrong and the governor of Colorado is right? Better get it in writing. It's just like that scene from the movie Clear and Present Danger, and the guy in the White House is sticking his paper in the face of Harrison Ford. Do you have a paper? Do you have a paper that's signed? I have a paper that's signed. I'm indemnified. I'm not going to jail. I'm not going to have all my legal expenses that had to come out of my own pocket. I'm indemnified. I got a letter with the signature of the president. You don't have that, do you? Do you, Jack? You're in trouble, not me. Same thing with all these guards. They're put in this position, and when Tina goes to sue, she's going to sue every last one of those people that refused to honor her pardon and continued as a RICO suit. They're involved in racketeering, potentially, where they're banding together to deny her civil rights. Why would the Fed step in there? Because civil rights of prisoners aren't being enforced. And it'll be a Fed takeover of the prison. Think about that.
Let me ask you this. Is one of the things that's being identified, and granted, I understand that we have the good guards that are in a very bad spot, and I definitely understand that. But is this delay and them not cooperating with the presidential pardon is this also going to kind of show who was the conspiracy behind the scene? Like I would imagine there's been, letters sent for preservations of emails and contacts between maybe the warden and the AG and the state governor and all that. So is Tina's case? I mean, are they to the point where their heels they got to just dig in because they don't have a choice because letting Tina out is just the end of them and they understand that.
Well, again, are the guards being sucked into somebody's political rodeo? And, where do they stand up? If I was one of the guards personally, and I'm very serious about this, I'd call in sick. I'd ask to be transferred to another area of the prison or even out of the prison, because here's part of the rest of the problem. The feds come in and take over the prison, and you go on your resume, I was a guard at La Vista Prison. Okay. Oh, the one that got taken over, the one where the prisoners' rights weren't being protected, and you didn't speak up? You didn't do anything? Go watch the old 1960 movie about the Nuremberg prosecutions of the street level people, the average people in Germany who participated in activity that was deemed against crimes against humanity.
Well,
okay,
they're expendable.
and
you're just in the eyes of the warden, in the eyes of all these people that are in positions of power. These guards, they're all expendable. They don't care about them.
I'm glad you said that you qualified that. They are not expendable. In the mind of the governor, of the attorney general, of the other people who are protecting their positions, they're expendable. But that is a wrong, dishonest practice. It is an unfair labor practice to put these people in that kind of a position where the only way they can take care of their family, the only way they can, in Germany, it's interesting. You go back and look at the testimony of the people in the Nuremberg trials. And as you got down through the ranks, the judges, the doctors, and like that, they would say stuff. Look, I had a family to feed. There was no food in Germany. I needed to, just stay alive. My family had to stay alive. Oh, okay. So because you had to be able to function, stay alive, it was okay for you to violate the human rights of others because it was the law of the land. We have to sterilize people that might not be as smart as other people. We have to sterilize people who are against the regime, if you will. 16-year-old girls brought in and electrodes used to sterilize them. Virgins, 14, 15 even, because they were politically not acceptable for various reasons. Was the doctors, was the nurses, the doctor, the nurse, gosh, I really feel bad about it. It's just not right. I don't know what to do. But here, lay down right here, and we'll try and make it as painless as possible. By the way, we're out of Novocaine today. We're out of, painkiller, whatever today. We're going to cut your bowels off, but the pain will only last so long. Okay. You'll get over it. You'll live. And that's what was done. I mean, that's a reality. Am I being extreme? Well, wait a second. Tina Peters is a cancer survivor. She is in a condition where she's being tortured in multiple ways. When you're in the hole, when you're in solitary 22 hours a day, the lights don't get turned out. They got the fluorescent lights beating down on you. You try to put something over your eyes, try to rest. You're on a 2-inch thick mattress. It just beats you up. When you're already not well, you're already coughing. What are they really trying to do? They literally want her dead. So she is a sacrifice in this political theater that they want sacrifice. They don't want her around. They want to send a message to anybody, if you go against the machine, you might win eventually, 20 years down the road, the court looks at it and says, well, yeah, I guess we were wrong. But, it's too bad she died in prison. Too bad she died a few months out of prison because she was in such bad shape. It's her fault she got cancer in the first place. It's her fault that it came back. Prison conditions are prison conditions. Sorry, but it's what it is. All the people that worked there when it happened, they're long gone. They've retired. They've gone on to other careers. Who's going to pay the price? Her civil rights are being violated this second.
Let me ask you this with that one, because this is the one thing that a lot of my audience has a concern with is I think everybody feels that Tina is out of time. Like the health crisis that exists around her, she's out of time. And we know that these court processes can be grueling as how long they take. Is there a contingency? Is there some type of ex parte or an emergency order that, whether it's a federal court or some type of system that will allow the U.S. Marshals or somebody to go in there and at a minimum, at least pull her into a medical facility, if not a change of correctional facilities?
Well, okay, it's painful to go through these gymnastics when we know that minutes are hours, hours are days, days are weeks, okay? You're shaving moments off of her life that even in a perfect situation, women do not fare as well in prison as men do. Men physically, mentally are better able to cope in a prison condition than women are. And so it is much more debilitating, destructive, to, how long they live even in a women's prison than it is over men's, physically. And so, she's 70 years old. The people that she's in prison with, most of them are a third of her age. There's very few that, are even close to her age in there. And so the system, it's even harsher for her like that. With that in mind, Trump has worked hard to work through the system. Again, as I said, if he just went in and grabbed her out, federal threat, all the things that they're doing to challenge it right now, they'd have raised in court, and it'd be a dogfight, and she wouldn't have been completely free. They were looking for Colorado to agree. They put lots of incentive there for them to agree, made it very easy to agree. They're not agreeing, and there's other things going on behind the scenes with certain players that may or may not be fully on board from a federal side over at Department of Justice. But when it was obvious there was just no way at the point of her birthday and immediately after, and then the habeas corpus hearing in court where the judge, bunted and said, no, I'm not doing anything. At that point, Trump had, given him every opportunity, in fact, including the fact that we have now all sorts of evidence of how the 2020 election was stolen, including exactly what Tina was guarding against, corruption in the machines. When we got the before and after, we saw that when we compare the before and after what was going on in the machines out there in Colorado, in Tina's case, they removed 29,000 files related to the 2020 election. 29,000. That's a violation of federal law, let alone the state law. Has anybody been prosecuted for that? Colorado is very aware of it. They've been put on notice. Trump and Justice Department, Homeland Security, Tulsi Gabbard, everybody, they're coming. They've been slow, but they're coming. And by the way, in Trump's defense, a lot of people are, well, that's Trump's fault. He's not doing it fast enough. He should have done it. No. Trump's only got 14 people into Homeland Security so far because the machine is so tweaked against being able to bring corrective action in there and get people out. Even with Bondi, the problem is that you have to go to the Senate, and he had to pick somebody that the Senate would approve or have nobody in there. He could have gone through numerous people, Sidney Powell, and all sorts of other ones that might have been, really favorable to the patriot community. He'd never got them past Congress. He never got them past the Senate. So you'd have had, you'd have had feel-good stuff, but the U.S. government isn't just the president. Now, let me say this conversely. Beyond the fact that Trump can, with federal oversight, decide that an emergency exists of such great magnitude in the way that prisoners' civil rights are being violated at La Vista Prison and or other prisons in the Colorado system, he could come in and take over that prison for some period of time until the conditions are resolved, the state comes up with a plan. And amongst all the things cited in the civil rights violations, the fact that they're violating Tina's civil rights when she has a federal pardon that is in fact enforceable, contrary to the governor's statements. They could do that almost immediately. They may have enough documentation already in enough places and be able to, go ahead and do it, and nobody's going to stop them. Beyond that, Trump has already, he's said, even within the context of a news conference was going on over Ukraine a while back, that he's about to sign an executive order. He said, in a few days. Well, it's been 5 weeks so far, but he was going to sign an executive order, he said, regarding the elections for 2026. Now, my team put together a proposed executive order, which we understand, from our sources is going to be 80 or 90% of what Trump eventually signs. That's the 17-page one. It's out in the open, so anybody can go read it and understand the logic of what's there. Trump's had that for 6 months, over 6 months. But, attorneys are looking at it. That's what he said. And they're, is there nuances? Look, we have attorneys, we have experts. That's why our people came up with that executive order, which is very critical. But the opening portion of that executive order, sorry, I had to get a little drink with the whistle here. The initiating portion of that executive order is that the president first has to initiate an election emergency order or decree, just like he did the COVID emergency back in 2020. A national emergency exists related to the COVID. We had to respond to it in a military sense because it's a continuity in government, continuity in governing and the people situation. It's a national security issue, taking it outside of the normal policing and things like that. President Trump has to and will institute a national emergency related to elections. When he does that, the executive order comes after the declaration of a national emergency related to elections. And let me give this piece for your listeners so they understand the context. President Trump issued an executive order number 107, 107th executive order of this administration on March 25th of 2025. Signed it reportedly 107 in the afternoon. Most people didn't catch it, don't know anything about it, care less, whatever. The executive order told all the states and the counties that you have to clean your voter rolls, and you have 180 days to do it because it's critical. How can you hold an election with fake voters, people that have been determined to be not citizens, people who aren't eligible to vote, people that are voting in multiple locations simultaneously? You got to clean those voter rolls. Well, and I've got friends that have come up with ways to do it, spent millions of dollars. They want to sell it to the government. They want to give it to the government to clean up the voter rolls, but they will all tell you that it's not 100%. It's, you clean them up, 70, 80, 90%. It's better, but it's not perfect. You just can't get to perfection. Cleaning up the existing voter rolls, it's just so complex. There's so many nuances. So within the national emergency, Trump ordered that the voter rolls by executive order be cleaned up. How many counties across the country cleaned up their voter rolls and got them 100%? I can tell you pretty authoritatively, pretty close to zero. And even where there was a little teeny effort made, the constraints are such. So the response is, we can't clean the voter rolls. You didn't give us a budget. Well, you have a budget because that's the job of the clerk's office. We couldn't clean them because of political considerations or whatever, So they didn't clean the voter rolls. They kind of thumbed their nose, gave Trump the finger. We're not doing anything. What are you going to do about it? So he gave an executive order, which wasn't honored, acted upon, obeyed, given any weight. 180 days has passed. That was back at September 25th. Nothing happened. What's Trump going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Huh? What are you going to do about it? Okay. You think Trump is without power. They showed that they won't, for whatever reason, logistically, it's not possible for them. Politically, it's not possible to go in there and clean these voter rolls, etc. But it's a national security issue. If you have people voting or voting multiple times that they're not supposed to be voting, they're not citizens, etc., or they don't have the right to vote because they're felons and things like that, then, you got a problem. So what Trump has to do is institute a national security emergency declaration. And under those emergency powers, take control of the election system, starting where they didn't comply in Executive Order 107 with the voter rolls, and force, instead of cleaning up the existing system, this is really, really, really key. It just can't be cleaned up. Setting it aside, we're not going to destroy it. We're going to set it aside because we're going to go back and prosecute people that were voting illegally, by the way. So we'll keep those records, but we'll set them aside. And now for 2026, 2028, if you want to vote, you've got to show up at the county, at the clerk's office, in person, with government-issued ID. You're going to have to re-register to vote, show your current address so you can be assigned to a precinct to vote in. And then you're going to do all of that under oath. I am authorized, I am a citizen, I do live at this place. And it's going to be recorded. All of the county clerks are in fact notaries. So they will notarize and stamp your signature. You're the person that presented themselves. The notary is under reporting obligations under penalty of law, and the person signing that is also under notice under penalty of prosecution for filing a false voter registration card. That registration card, a copy of it's going out to the precinct, and they'll check it every time you go in there to vote. When you sign in, make sure the signature matches, the information on your ID matches, etc. Clean voter rolls are the first thing in this national election emergency, so that we only have citizens voting, and they're voting at the right place. No mail-in votes, none for 2026, 2028, no mail-in. So places like Hawaii, where they have tens and tens of thousands of people who supposedly mailed in their ballot, but there's no envelope. There's no pictures within the postal system showing them going through the postal system. Every piece of mail is photographed. Every single piece of mail. You think we could have missed in Hawaii County 19,000 missing ballots that were sent through the mail allegedly? No, somebody brought those in, put them in there. There's no envelope. They just wanted to cook the vote. Where tens of votes made the difference between who won and lost. They got 19,000. Where's that going on? By the way, over in Georgia, The number of votes that cannot be accounted for right now is like 231,000 or something. And they're not even done. That's just within like one county. So, and that's where the federal suit's at. The counties aren't providing their vote information. The states aren't providing their vote information. So within that national security elections order, anybody that wants to go through the courts, here's the wild part: no courts. It's in a national emergency. They can go take evidence related to elections under the national emergency, and you don't go through the courts. No judge can stop Trump from telling the counties they have to re-register all voters. You can't go to a judge and get them to overturn President Trump's emergency national security order because it's a continuity in government thing. If a judge tries to interfere and issues some order, the judge is now an insurrectionist. They're acting in a seditious manner, and therefore they can be picked up, the zip ties put on their wrists, and taken in and prosecuted for sedition, okay, for leading an insurrection, any of the people involved. So let them try. Trump's going to issue a national security emergency executive action for the way that we do the vote for 2026. Then the next thing that happens is, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let me ask you this one. We did have Kash Patel say about 3 weeks ago, right around there, that by the end of, he said December 31st, we're going to see something major. Is this one of those things where we see that emergency declared by President Trump, or is this something you anticipate is still further out in the future?
Well, even on Tina's situation, there's a theme that is part of what Trump wants to act on and enforce and things like that. And that theme is dark to light. And so within a dark to light theme, here we are today, the 21st of December. Today is the shortest day of the year, the longest night of the year. On the 22nd, hovering right in there at the shortest, longest day and night. And we start the march back to light. In the ancient occult and religions, Babylon, Samaria, Egypt, everything else, they considered that the sun hovered at this low level on the horizon, and it was about 3 days before it decisively, clearly was beginning its march back. And so that's why you celebrate Christmas on the 25th. That's not the date that Christ was born. That is this Horus, Osiris, sun worshippers date. It's based on the Prince of Misrule in Roman times, where they would have the Misrule holiday. It was a Saturnist festival, and church people were trying to recapture, that time of the year away from the pagans, allegedly, and so they put Christmas in that time of year. Christ wasn't born then. Christ was born 911-3 BC, and there's lots of records that seem to confirm that. And by the way, these occultists believe that, these royalist families believe that. And why did 9/11 have to happen on that date? Because they wanted to vilify the true birth date of Christ, but 3 BC. You can argue about that. Is it, whatever. It's there's a lot of research. It's an interesting conversation, but certainly by their actions, they've shown how they think about it with the truth, the devil himself, whatever, with that 9/11 stuff. By the way, Tina was born 9/11 of 1955. So, she's a 9/11 kid. So, but the reason that I mention all of that is that Trump could take action immediately, and there's a certain symbology on this dark to light day of beginning the process of bringing to light all the election fraud, all the players involved in these things and exposing them and out through the rest of the year. And that's what he's talked about, that we need to bring all these things to light. We have dump truckloads full, truckloads full. It's actually dump truckloads. But at the end of the day, you have all sorts of things that need to be brought out, dark to light. If he was to start with, say, a Tina today or tomorrow being more likely, that would sort of kind of fit that kind of a theme. And from our standpoint as citizens, it'd be a great Christmas present. Is this that moment? Would he declare this national election emergency before the end of this year? There's some logic to say that he wouldn't declare it till sometime in January, and I've looked at that, and I do get it. And so that's part of the reason for being slow on Tina, because he was going to save it for that window, but her health isn't allowing that. So we've got the federal investigation. They've come up with other stuff to try and get her free sooner. He cannot get her out of there one day too soon, okay, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree.
There's just so much at stake for her. And she can't be offered up on the altar of bureaucracy for either side, in my opinion. And plus, he issues the pardon and then they ignore it. Again, I go back to the prison staff. I have a lot of respect for the people that work in that kind of an environment and for the conundrum they're in between their job, their employment, what they've been told to do, etc. But, it sounds extreme. I don't think it's as extreme as you think, that this is a Nazi-esque thing, especially when every day you're playing roulette with how many more days she has left in this world, whether or not the cancer gets to a point where she doesn't have recovery time. You have a point of no return on the aircraft. When Biffle's jet turned around and tried to make it back to the airport the other day, that was 10 minutes of flying. And they realized very shortly into the flight, they were in serious, serious trouble. They had to carefully make the turn without losing lift in a difficult situation. When they flew back, they were 1,000 feet short of getting to the runway. 1,000 feet, a fifth of a mile. They flew a couple dozen miles in this period of time, but they were only 1,000 feet short. If they just had 1,000 feet, if Tina just had a day, a couple of days, a week or two more, where she wasn't getting worse and worse and worse, where she had more runway to work on the recovery, how much more life does that buy her? Is it months? Is it years? How much is it worth to anybody? What would a legal settlement, monetary settlement, be worth in the nicest graveyard anywhere in the country? What are you going to do with it? How's that benefit you? Even a symbolic victory down the road over her, body. I don't want to be at some great event. We all have our cell phones out with the lights on, candle in the wind. Tina, you were so wonderful. We remember you and everything else. Bullshit. I want Tina. I want her out. I want her to be able to enjoy the victory. I want to be able to win with her there with us on all of these illegalities that have been done to the American people. And by the way, even to the J6 situation, why did everybody show up on January 6th in Washington, D.C.? Do you know that was the largest turnout of American citizens in Washington, D.C. ever? No other event ever in Washington, D.C. had as many people turn out, even in the middle of the summer. Arguably, 1.5 to 2 million people in the broader area showed up there at Washington, D.C. And what were they there for? They weren't there to tear Washington, D.C. apart. If they wanted to, they could have. They weren't there to occupy and do a sit-down protest in the Congress. If they wanted to, they could have. They were baited. They were prodded. You had 500 people that the feds wanted to participate, pay on the payroll somewhere to try and set everybody up. But at the end of the day, it was a setup. It was a racket. And the American people didn't do what was purported to do. What were they there to do? To say something's wrong when the electors, the ones with information like came out of Tina's office, showed up with false information and then put somebody in office who clearly was not the will of the people in a fraudulent election, where it was provably fraudulent at the time, but Congress didn't want to do the thing. Remember, Trump had an executive order concerning foreign interference. They were supposed to get a report 45 days after the election, December 18th. That's why the friends of President Trump showed up at the Oval Office. Patrick Byrne, the Flynn brothers, Giuliani, Cipollone's attorney, Sidney Powell, Garrett Ziegler kind of set that whole thing up, who was working in the White House at the time. And tried to get Trump to do something. There's no such document as an Insurrection Act document, but they're trying to get him to agree to allow Sidney Powell to prepare a document that he could sign, instituting a Insurrection Act, like Lincoln did, for all the falsity within the vote, because people were, not doing their job over Homeland Security. With all of that in mind, you could say that Tina, because they didn't do their job in blocking false election returns at the January 6th thing, Tina had to do what she did when she made the copy, when they were going to change the computers, the Dominion trusted build out in March, that Tina was forced to do that because Congress didn't do what they're supposed to do. Homeland Security didn't do what it was supposed to do with the vote. In the whole country, 2,500 clerks, she's the only one that got a before and after and documented, and it is the Rosetta Stone to see what was done in the foreign interference in the computers. And we have other experts that are the ones that we have the documentation of the illegal ballots printed in China coming into the United States. So Tina did something important, beautiful for all of us, and then she's suffering. She's giving up minutes of her life for all of us in this fraud of the 2020 election, and her prosecution and the illegal prosecution within the state. We need to bust her free and give her a life, give her a chance.
I agree. Well, Juan, thank you for coming on and giving us this update. I know the audience has had a lot of questions, and I know everybody feels this urgency that we have to move now, especially when it comes to Tina. So I want to say thank you.
And let me just say this: I know that your audience and many other audiences called the White House. At this point, Polis had lots of calls. The prison system had lots of calls that were not, they just blew them off. They didn't care. But the White House, President Trump was very aware. The situation with Tina trended predominantly over weeks in the White House call lines and emails. And that had an impact on the president's decision to act unilaterally. See, when he issued the pardon, he didn't ask permission. He didn't ask for assistance in how it was written over to the Justice Department. He just said, I'm pardoning Tina Peters. And he signed it the next morning, did that on the 10th and signed it the next morning when the document was actually finished. He didn't wait for the Justice Department any further. He wanted this done immediately. They're still not honoring it there in Colorado. And you could say, well, just send in a bunch of feds or whatever. He could, but there's all sorts of logistics and disruption. All that, the cure can't be worse than the disease. So with that in mind, there's stuff that's coming, and I know even right this second, there's stuff that's happening behind the scenes, very diligently, urgently being dealt with. That said, trust but verify. What I would ask everybody here in your audience to do is tomorrow morning from 10 o'clock to 3 o'clock, the call lines are manned by volunteers at the White House. They keep track of the trend in the calls. And I would I would support the president and thank him for issuing the pardon that for Tina. That was what he did to start the ball rolling. Colorado, who could have expected that they would just ignore it completely? It's crazy. They're going to suffer for it eventually, but Tina doesn't have time for that. I would be thankful for what he's done and make sure that that's a key portion of it, and ask that he proceed by whatever measures are needed at this point to quickly now secure her, since the governor is acting in a seditious manner, undermining the legal authority of the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief. This is a national security issue. It's going to be made known to be so shortly. Tina doesn't have the luxury of time, and so we respectfully request that with all urgency, the President, he can, just figure it out, okay? I don't need to tell him what to do. He can just figure it out. Get her out of there right now, please, Mr. President. And I would make those calls. I would make them urgently. I would have the phone lines trending exclusively towards Tina. I wouldn't back off because she's not out yet. And that's what I would ask people to do, so that he knows that he's on solid ground within the population, within the electorate, to take whatever measure he has to do in order to protect Tina's life and well-being, and give her as much time as possible with whatever's going on medically that is erupting right now, to give her the best shot possible at healing up 100%. That makes sense?
Absolutely makes sense. Yeah, I constantly, try to make sure that myself and my audience understand that the court of public opinion is something huge for the president to have, and that morale is a weapon. And that's why we see it constantly being attacked or try to be leveraged against President Trump or MAGA, or however people want to see it. So no, it does make sense, Juan.
Well, and part of it is the media wants to report as though he's off in some tangent. He doesn't have authority. He needs to shut them up by his actions. He had USA Today. Well, it was symbolic that the president pardoned her, and they can't get her out. The governor of Colorado is in charge here, and you can't Well, so you're saying that the union of the states, the president's just symbolic. The more powerful one, the governor of Colorado says, well, we'll have to see what a federal judge says. If you can get a judge to say she should be out, then we'll honor all of that. Okay, well, judges are the ones that said that Trump has to be taken off the ballot in Colorado, attorneys and everybody else. And what happened? They aren't the final word. And in this case, she is symbolic. She is iconic. If you can't protect Tina, can you protect anybody else? Okay. So we need to go in there and show, yes, we can. And we are going to enforce the rule of law. And if there's going to be dithering, it's going to be dithering, but not at Tina's expense. You want to go through the courts for the next 10 years? See, Tina should be out on bail while her case is on appeal. Okay. Just like Trump, if they wanted to do something, take him off the ballot, they couldn't damage the election with him off the ballot, because it would be irreconcilable if he won his appeals in the court in New York. So his case wasn't done yet. They had tried to put something in place, but there was appeals in the way. Tina's losing days of her life, and her case is on appeal. And if she wins, can anything be done to buy her back any of those days at any number? What's it worth? So it's irreconcilable for her if, in fact, she gets her empirical victory down the road. It's wrong. And at the very least, she should be out on bail. She should have been turned over to the feds when we asked them to. But she's a political prisoner in a rigged election, and Trump has said that. And so his actions, he needs to know, and the media needs to know, and the governor of Colorado needs to know, and Congress needs to know that when he goes in and takes direct action to protect her civil rights and remove her from that prison, that it was with the agreement of the American people. And those calls help to let everybody involved know, not just the president, but they can be cited. This is the will of the people, that she not be somebody's sacrifice in the bureaucratic altar. It just isn't acceptable for us to have that happen that way. That make sense?
It does. It does. And I agree with that. There are some things you can't fix even later on with lawsuits and monetary compensation. Time off someone's life. I mean, how do you put a price on that? Especially when it starts to tear away at the quality of life that's left.
Yep. That's exactly it. So, Father God, help all involved, including President Trump, to move quickly, decisively to free Tina immediately, and then give us wisdom, give her wisdom as we seek to bring her back to health and to utilize her understanding, knowledge, life energy to restore America to lawful governance, lawfully elected leaders. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us, Juan. I'm going to make sure I get this out very quick to the audience right now so we can get on it so everybody can make those calls first thing tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, you guys.
Yep, that's exactly it. Thank you, folks. And you can send emails anytime. I do both. Let's get her done. And by the way, just again, prison guards over there, protect yourself. Get private legal counsel to see if you can secure. And I wouldn't be showing up doing anything because we put a notice of potential violation out. We were seeking publication in Colorado and haven't been able to find any of the major publications that would agree to publish that notice of public potential violation, I should say. Yeah. So, but you need the documentation, that you at least even tried to determine if what you're doing was legal. You want to be on the right side of history. And by the way, if you're not, you're doing something that, what if it's you? What if the roles reversed? You could be Tina. Give it some thought. I'm asking, because I'm not adversarial to the guards in the situation. I'm trying to give you the right advice. I think you need to think about it. Think twice. Think 10 times. All right. There you go, bro.
Much appreciated, Juan. You guys enjoy the rest of the day. It absolutely looks beautiful out there. I'm very jealous from Southern California.
Yeah, it's going to rain here in a moment, but I love it. It's very fun. So anyway, all right.
All right, Juan. Take it easy. God bless, brother. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you saw Juan 107, Juanito, as Nino has so appropriately coined that term. I mean, you guys know my feelings towards Tina Peters. You guys know the weight that I have put on you guys as an audience to try to help be a part of this. And again, there's another call to action there that's legal, that's lawful, and that you guys can do tomorrow that's respectful. Again, just to recap, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. Get on those phone lines, call in, and thank at the White House, and thank the president for doing the pardon of Tina Peters, and then to make sure that you end that conversation with them understanding that you 100% support and demand that he does whatever he needs to do to follow through with the execution of that pardon that he's requested. Let him know that we, the people, support him. We support Tina Peters. With that, you guys, this is Christmas week. So I'm trying to figure out the way the schedule will look for this week coming up. We will definitely have Just Alpha tomorrow night. It's going to be a very long episode because I anticipate there's probably not going to be one on Christmas Day. So I'm probably going to do one that is probably going to break a record on how long it is. I don't know. We will see. And then I do have a show lined up for you on Tuesday that you guys are definitely going to appreciate. So up in the air for what Wednesday and Thursday looks like. So we will see. But definitely a show tomorrow on Monday, and definitely a show on Tuesday. And you guys get this special broadcast tonight, sometime before Q After Hours starts. So whenever this show finishes, just remember tonight over there on Badlands, at midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific. We are going to be doing Q After Hours. So with that, guys, God bless. Good night. December 5.